What were you saying about having a topic list?
Well, all the things we were talking about, I am trying to keep them straight. So
Yeah.
wondering if that would be helpful.
We're talking a lot about a lot of different things this week, especially this weekend. Hello, everybody. This is the DeepEnd with Les and Ben, or Leslie and Benjamin, depending on how formal you guys want to get. Thank you and welcome. And the audio looks fine on my end. Let me know in the comments if it's not working for you guys. And oh, hello, Twitter, too. Apparently, we're streaming to Twitter. I don't know who uses Twitter for long videos, but maybe there's a few people.
Yeah, maybe so. Well, hello. Good morning. Happy Sunday. Like the first time we did this, and I said, it's nice to see you.
It's nice to see you
Nice
too,
to
Leslie.
see you, yeah.
Yeah, we're no longer in our pajamas. We
No.
get progressively more and more professional as this show goes on.
Well, we're going somewhere fancy today, so you've got your fancy shirt under your fancy jacket.
Yeah. When you're sitting down, can you unbutton?
Yeah,
Is that okay?
I think that's okay.
It looks slightly less cool, but it feels better. Yeah. So there is, I guess, the shape that we're taking here. I guess we use this program to go over the topics that we've been thinking about, and also maybe we go over what our channels have been exploring. Mm-hmm. Last week, I think or week before last, which I can't even totally remember. What were we speaking mostly about?
We talked about relationship dynamics, and we talked about the 30-year-old who was just enjoying her Netflix instead of wanting a family, being glad she wasn't encumbered by family responsibilities and that kind of thing. And something that came up, it's come up in a couple of conversations for me, and it came up in one of my solid ground groups recently, was this idea that the way that the culture is moving, we can think of it as social engineering, or we can think about it as emergent, whichever perspective you come from. There are a lot of us who've been critical of it, and maybe that's kind of maybe we need to just let things be the way that they are. Maybe things are developing and we're kind of the ones who are holding on to outmoded ways of thinking, and we should allow things to go in a new direction. And I don't hold that opinion myself, but it's something worth thinking about. Is the Gen X perspective, is it kind of like an old outmoded boomer kind of perspective in some way?
Well, let's put that in context. So what do you mean by the Gen X perspective? Everything was great in the 90s. Can we just go back to the 90s? Is that
Maybe,
kind
and
of the thing?
More specifically, when we're talking about like the LGBT movements that have been going on and the remaking of relationship dynamics and sort of thinking about sexuality, thinking about relationships differently. And there's been so much conversation about this online, and that's kind of a new area for me to be delving into a lot, because I haven't done a lot of social media in the past. It's sort of just been this last year that I've been exposed to a lot more of these broader like thinking waves in the population. Mm-hmm. And it seems like people really talk in terms of archetypes and generalizations. You hear men are like this, women are like this. And one of the things that I've gotten, I actually like removed this one user from my YouTube recently, which I never do. I don't like to censor that. I like the conversations and the comments just be whatever they are. But this one person was like relentlessly picking on me and calling me a feminist, and in this way that
was he off somehow?
I mean, I think he was off, but I think also he was doing it in a really specific. It was obviously a derogatory thing, and it was like, when is she going to realize that her feminism, and it was like this constant attack, and it felt like it's this. It's part of this same overgeneralization, this conversation about men and women. But we have gotten to a place where, with the gender conversation, we've obviously seen that sex roles and things have broken down to the point where we don't even know if we're men or women. And so there's this push to kind of redefine roles and redefine what this means, and what does masculinity mean, and what does femininity mean, and what is a proper relationship dynamic. And I think that that's coming out in some of the conversations we've already talked about, like the body count thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on all that?
Well, there's a lot of different thoughts, and I had one to follow up with, but then you brought up body count, and that made me think about the conversations we've been having about the so-called body count and these allegations against Russell Brand that are coming out, and how that fractures along political lines, where people defend Russell Brand because of politics, or they say that the system's going after him, but it's the same people. There's kind of slight overlap with, do you defend Laura Boebert or not, or you shouldn't defend Laura Boebert or not because she was seen being groped in a theater and then made a stink about that. And then you also have that, you have Russell Brand, who was celebrated for being the shag artist of the year, having thousands of sexual partners, then switching from progressive to anti-establishment or anti-regime position. And everybody, so it seems like sexual morality is used, or shaming somebody's sexual morality is being used in a very specific way, usually to shame somebody. In these different instances, do we feel pride in that? Or do we feel shame in that? Who gets to decide who to judge who? And with Russell Brand, it's about consent, I guess. If he was using his position of power and he was going after
taking advantage of people,
taking advantage of young girls, as opposed to that girl, that Logan Paul's wife, who was making herself sexually available and being the one that was engaging in all these things. And so the consent doesn't necessarily fall along power balances. She was moving up the ladder, and he was using his position on the ladder to get his way. And why or why not are they being shamed? Why is sexuality being used, or promiscuity is specifically being used to shame these people? But at the same time, it's a culture of licentiousness, of like, you do you, and nobody's going to judge you along those ways. So I guess to go back to what you're saying, should we just let this happen? Should we just let this go out? That is a position of just being open. And to what degree should you just go with the flow, or just be open? Or like with polyamory, just like let the kids play. In the 70s, in the 60s and 70s, there was a lot of playing around, or at least popularization of that playing around, and playing with gender roles, playing with sexuality and stuff, and then that had consequences for that generation. If the kids want to do that again, speaking as a Gen Xer, if the next generation wants to do that again, who am I to stop them? Is that not a position itself to take?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is. I think that's well. And going back to one of the things you said about Russell Brand, celebrated as the shag artist of the year,
or something like that.
Do you think that he was ever really celebrated for that? Because I guess in terms of like sexual partners, number of sexual partners, there's always been this the imbalance between men and women and how they're perceived based on their sexual conquests.
Yes.
But I think that this was part of his comedy, wasn't it? I mean, he's always it's been sort of a self-deprecating thing. So I'm not sure it was, maybe I'm quibbling with one tiny little point, but I don't know if it was exactly a celebration of that kind of behavior.
It was
in
part
his
of his,
it was part of his making fun of himself. Like, I'm such a hoe, look at what I don't think that it was necessarily, maybe not, but.
Well, I mean, he's fulfilling that archetypal role. You have this idea that you've been. This is limoncello that we made. we added sugar water to it, and it became really creamy all of a sudden. It's kind of
really
odd.
nice.
I wonder why it does that. What chemical reaction? Needs water. Wow.
Straw.
That's just Everclear and lemons and sugar. Here,
Wow. Okay, thank you.
Sorry
now
about
we have
that.
a little lemonade.
Yeah, we have a little hot lemonade.
That's pretty good. It's our first try.
And then we went to a dinner party last night, and somebody was also talking about, like, there was this woman, she was talking about, like, years ago, she and her husband would drive across eastern Washington, and he would drive really, really fast. And she just had this sense that there were cops up the road, that there were law enforcement on the road, and she could always just feel them there. And she said something, we were investigating, well, why do you think that is? And she said that whenever you fulfill a role in the world, either you're drawn to that role because you have a certain vibe or frequency, or that role demands that you have a certain vibe or frequency and stuff. So I think that in the case of Russell Brand, he has a brand. And he dove into that brand. It was an archetype. He has the shirt unbuttoned. He's got like this very like this the aesthetic and then the behavior of that. It could be a role, and he's probably highly intelligent, so he was able to meta on top of that and make fun of that, but also to inhabit the role. But he was inhabiting that role of the player of the what is gigolo the right word?
I think that's
Rock star
yeah.
kind of thing.
I
Yeah,
think it's a different power with gigolo.
yeah.
But
And
yeah.
So he was a man slut, and that was part of his brand, and he fulfilled that role as doing that. So in the world, there are these roles. There are these people who want to fit in these roles. But if you look at the roles, there are archetypal arcs for that kind of person. I even think he made a movie about that with Jonah Hill, where Jonah Hill was the straight-laced guy that was trying to get this rock star to some event. And I only watched the trailers for this, but he was so incapable of taking care of himself, Russell Brand character, because he was just like always drunk and
just this hedonist.
He's just this hedonist. He's purely just going along that line. So it's kind of just, we understand that this is the kind of person that he inhabited, or the kind of role that he inhabited. When he goes from being a progressive, hardcore progressive, to a dissident, then he inserts that role. That role marries with this anti-regime role, which makes him an enemy of the regime. He's poking narratives in the regime, and so he's an enemy of this mechanism. So suddenly his sexuality is a liability at that point, but it wasn't a liability when that's what he was.
Well, that kind of goes back to the let the kids play. I mean, at one point he's still in his playing phase, and once you grow up, you adopt more adult ways of being. But I don't think he comes out of that unscathed, obviously. I mean, obviously, whatever has happened has made it, either he has done things that are really awful and egregious in the pursuit of all those sexual conquests, or he's lived a life that makes that believable.
Yeah.
So either way, he doesn't come out of it unscathed.
Yeah. But it's interesting because people now cast lots with him, because he's playing another role for people. He's the dissident guy. He's the guy who's going to tell you things, and he's very, very intelligent, very good at his job. He possesses the camera. He's really there. He's telling you the truth. He's interviewing. A lot of people respect him. In kind of the post IDW sphere, the dissident sphere, which has problems of its own with regards to perception. So he's inhabiting this role. Then people want to defend him against these allegations because he's serving a role for them now. He's got this other kind of job that he's doing. He's leaning into this job. So to what degree, and somebody else I was reading about this, somebody said, well, we need redemption arcs. Redemption arcs are healthy for society. You have the guy who goes down into the depths, and then he figures out some truth, and then he comes back and he serves society. He's like, okay, my role is no longer just about me, just about my own conquests. So in a certain respect, he's being noble now by, serving other people. At least that's kind of his role, or a lot of people feel that he is serving them by giving them harbor in this field of narrative warfare.
So he gets to be the prodigal son.
So we get in a certain respect, he gets to be a prodigal son.
Yeah, and and the redemption arc that you're talking about also is kind of the logical conclusion of the let the kids play argument.
Yeah.
It's to say that you will do this at this point in your life, and then you will reach some kind of maturity where this is not your role anymore. Yeah, it is really interesting.
So do you let the kids play?
That's a good question.
Well, okay, there's one thing about letting the kids play and kind of saying, okay, listen, I did this, or this happens before, this is what's going to happen to you. Because you're following your instinct. This is a tried and true method. You're gonna prodigal your way, and you'll either be lost or you'll come back home. But in the story of the prodigal son, there's a lot of different dynamics going on in that story. There's the father who probably warned his son not to do that. In the story that Jesus told, the father says, do whatever you want, and I'm not going to stop you. But I'm sure that the father took his paternal duty seriously and said, okay, listen, if you go this path, there's consequences to this. And then there was a good son, too, who stayed on the farm, who lived his life. And then when the prodigal son goes back, he's really jealous. He's like, well, why? I did everything in my power to follow the straight and narrow path, and he gets rewarded for coming
gets
back.
celebrated.
He gets celebrated, right? Which, and I think part of the moral of the story is like to humble yourself when you see that, the prodigal son return, because it's beautiful that he came back. But there's also, you can't deny the fact that if, like with the college loan forgiveness, there's all those parents and all those families who work so hard
to pay those
things off, and then the government comes in and says, okay, we're gonna erase that.
We're gonna reward you for not having paid your debt.
Yeah, we're going to reward you for not paying your debt. So what I'm trying to get to is that let the kids play is fine, but we can't, I think it's not responsible for people who have wisdom or who are working at the truth and at the good and the beautiful to not exemplify that or describe what is a good life. What are the rewards inherent in not ceding yourself to your passions?
Well, and letting the kids play in this context, if you're talking about, post-sexual revolution, I think that having that attitude is sort of predicated upon having this societal foundation that they will come back to. So once you get a couple generations down and the kids have been playing and playing and playing, what do they have to look back on? What do they come home to?
Yeah.
And it's just a perpetual degradation. It's just a decay. And so, again, you come back to this idea that after several generations, we've broken things down to the point where we don't even know what we are anymore. Yeah. We don't even have a sense of foundations and boundaries. And that's something that I see people kind of grappling with as I'm watching these conversations happen online about relationship. And that's been really interesting to watch. And some things are, I guess the generalization, the archetypification. You see people who will say, like a woman who will say, men are like, I don't trust men because they see women like this. And she doesn't see the irony in the fact that she sees men like this. Like it's this overgeneralization on both sides. But it seems like kind of a natural response to the whole idea that heteronormativity is just a bad thing. That this is what we've been taught, that this is bad, and we're supposed to queer everything and have this completely open perspective on what we can be. And there's no such thing as kink shaming. We should do away with that. We should be allowed to do everything but want a heteronormative life, a heterosexual, monogamous, nuclear family.
Enforced monogamy.
Yeah.
So this goes back to what we were picking up and why I chide you with your liberalism, even though I am a liberal too. I'm a liberal in disposition, whether I like it or not. I'm a postmodernist, whether I like it or not. I'm a liberal, but I am trying to be very aware of the flaws in liberalism and the flaws in postmodernism in all of its various manifestations. But you don't want to be an authoritarian. Mm-hmm. You know that, right?
Yeah.
So how do you exemplify the good or look down on people, shame people, say, you know what, you are acting like a dog. So even though like you went out and you Russell Brand, and I'm sorry, I don't know about his allegations. Sorry, he's a topic of our conversation. Sorry also that last week we spoke about this 30-year-old woman.
You're sorry about that?
Well, I saw that people went really hard against this 30-year-old woman, and but if you put yourself out there, you become a topic of conversation. Leslie and I have become a topic of conversation.
Yeah.
Right? We are a topic of conversation. So
unfortunately,
there's that. But if Russell Brand decides to go out and be a dog, and then for some reason he's like, a dog needs a job. Like it's not enough to just be a dog. I need to serve a master, right? So he wags his tail over and he finds something that's good for other people, and you say, well, okay, well, you're a dog, you were a dog, you're probably still a dog now, but you're a dog on my team. You're a dog, you've chained yourself now to the sled. You're not just out there hounding around. You're a part of something bigger than you. And so I can see your nature as it is and not adulate you for your nature or make any excuses for your nature, but say, it would probably be best for you to really examine. It would probably be best for him to really examine. It would be great if he said, okay, I was behaving in this way, and this is what I learned from these experiences.
I think he has said that, hasn't he? Hasn't he spent a lot of time talking about that?
I don't know.
So I think in his case also, it's not just the it's not just that people want to side with him because they like what he's saying, and so that they're willing to accept his past or his proclivities because they like the position he's taking right now. I think it's also because it's a predictable playbook. The pattern of people are saying this, that there's this pattern of discredit people who are getting a lot of attention. What was the whole thing about malinformation, right?
Yeah. So
the whole
Eric
idea.
Weinstein on that really handsome guy who's he's the interviewer who's massively more successful. Chris Williams.
I don't know.
There's this clip floating around, and Eric Weinstein talked about pre-bunking. You pre-bunk somebody who's telling the truth, so you erode their reputation. Instead of dealing with the information that you don't want out there, the truth teller, you attack the truth teller. You attack the messenger, and the message will somehow be lost in that attack.
Yeah.
As long as it doesn't blow up in your face. It could be the case that this conversation about Russell Brand does lead more people to examining the narratives that he's poking holes in, which would be a net benefit.
And the fact that that's such a topic of conversation around this it shows either that it happens a lot, or at least that public trust is so low that people would automatically go to that.
Yeah. So when we're talking about archetypes, Russell Brand is fitting himself into an archetype of the rock star with the redemption arc, let's say. What is there something similar available to women? Like with Logan Paul's wife, with this 30-year-old woman?
That is a really good question.
Yeah. Like what happens with the woman with the high body count?
That is a really good question. I think it's going to be a big question for a lot of people as we see the homemade porn industry mature. Because there are a lot of women who are doing this OnlyFans thing. Yeah. Who it's relatively new. How many years has that been out? Like 5 to 10? It
exploded during the pandemic.
Okay. Yeah. So it's this brand new thing where people make
the response to the pandemic.
The lockdown.
Screw you, YouTube.
Oh gosh.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. But so this is brand new. I mean, the whole camming thing has been around for a little while, but the homemade porn thing is it's
newish. Been around since there's been home owned video cameras. So let's just say that.
Yeah, and it's new enough that it came about after my
there's no piece of technology that people haven't used to accentuate their sex life. I'm pretty sure. I mean, maybe some certain technology, some very specific metals in like NASA, like space exploration, probably haven't been used to accentuate people's sex lives. But
that's
I'm
really
pretty
interesting. Sure. I can probably look around.
If they're human beings we are very sexual creatures, and we just use whatever we can we incorporate everything into that. So
webcamming included.
Webcamming is just like the one that's most obvious, but I'm sure like every, like candlelight, I'm sure was used.
So there've been opportunities. Like we were talking about this yesterday. I knew one girl. I was grew up in a poor area, socioeconomically depressed area, but it wasn't a common thing for girls to go into any kind of sex work. So somebody had made a comment about that on one of my videos where we talked about porn, sex work, promiscuity, and talked about why women would be drawn to that. And someone said they do it because they're poor and this is a great way for them to make money. And I don't disagree that that's part of it, but I think that there's more to it because I grew up poor and grew up with a lot of people who didn't have any money, and maybe that would have been a thing, but it wasn't as much a cultural thing then, in the 90s. It wasn't a thing. I knew one girl who went on to become a stripper. And now there's such a proliferation of it's easy. There's a low barrier to access to entry to that field, and you're making your own money, I guess. So you're setting up your own subscriptions. So you're earning directly. You're not having to work for somebody else or be produced by somebody else. Yeah. And so what that's going to do, it seems, is going to create a lot more women who have this in their history, who have to deal with this going forward. How do they integrate that into the rest of their life? And that's, I think, a little bit of a Russell Brand analog in a way, because they will have this public and large part of themselves that was dedicated to this one kind of expression and this one kind of engagement. And is there a redemption arc? If they want to go on, are they going to be happy with this forever? And it seems like likely not for most of them, because women age out of being attractive in that way to audiences and to men. And as they get older, they're going to be less and less interesting in this way. So what does that look like as they get older?
I have interviewed 2 or 3 porn star come podcasters. Where they, I think Eva Lovia is one, and Ayla is another. She's not necessarily a podcaster, but she's got an public intellectual side. And then another with Alice Vaughn, and I interviewed another porn star, and they go from porn star to podcaster, and they have when I speak to them about their choices or their career, well, it's interesting because I'm trying to be kind and non-judgmental, so I'm trying to figure out like what do you do when you're a porn star? Like what are the dynamics, the relational dynamics of that? Like beyond whether it's good or bad for you, like what did you get out of it? What did you give to it? And one interesting thread is that a lot of the women that I spoke to, it becomes sex. There's the sex aspect to it, but there's this therapeutic aspect where they end up becoming therapists in a way, like where these men they're stuck in some way. They want connection ultimately, and the sex is the transactional, the sex for money thing is the frame on which there's this kind of simulacra of human connection. And the woman is kind of in control of that situation, and the man's kind of subservient to that situation, but he wants tending, he wants some sort of
acceptance.
He wants to be seen or touched in some way that's just beyond just the releasing of a sexual tension. So there is a human aspect to being a whore or a prostitute or even an online e-girl. There's this human aspect, and it kind of seems to be along a therapeutic route.
Oh, that's interesting. I think that I can see what you're saying, and at the same time, it seems like it's a breaking down of potential because both people are limiting their own potential for a real connection by accepting this shallow connection.
Yeah. Well, this is a point that we've talked about. There's different people with different morality, and it's really strange to me when I've spoken with the very intellectual porn stars or ex-porn stars that they just have sexuality is not necessarily directly tied to a transcendent human connection. It's not necessary. It's kind of just this thing that is done. Like animals just do this thing. It can be connected to the heart, and it can be not connected to the heart.
Is that a dysfunction, or is it just an alternative way of seeing things?
That's the question. But from your moral standpoint, what you express is that if one uses that sexual aspect of themselves transactionally, then they are degrading their ability to use that sexual aspect of themselves for human connection. So that opens up the question of the redemption arc in one respect.
And I guess redeemed to what, though? Redeemed to what? Because if you have a secular society and traditions have broken down and the cultural prohibition against certain acts has gone away, everything's being redefined, and it's redefined based on what? And I guess that's something I keep wondering about is what is, for all the criticism of Pride Month, Pride Year, Pride whatever it is, this like breaking down of all barriers to sexual expression and connection. There's a lot of criticism around that. What is the place from which? What is the place of strength from which you criticize that? What are you holding up when you do that? And I guess it's a question I want to refine and understand.
Well, yeah, where are you drawing the line? What are you standing on
what
to
is
make
the wall that you're backed up against?
Yeah.
Where's your solid foundation?
Yeah. So okay, well, let's find something to judge. What do you want to judge?
I don't know. Why don't you see what anybody says in the chat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody wants to be adored. Jock of Ages wants to be adored. I think that's actually a quote.
No one is caring for the woman. What is that about?
No one's caring for the woman.
That's
Where? But no
Helena
Emily Allen?
Blavatsky says the therapeutic my ass.
Yeah. Well, I've asked that, and people can.
Yeah, redeemed to what? She says that's the thing. Yeah. That's the thing, redeemed to what? What's your basis? And I think that's the question.
Well, there is an asymmetry between how men are judged for sexual promiscuity and how women are judged for sexual promiscuity. And there's different reasons for that. You can say that evolutionarily wise, you can say intra female interest sexual competition wise, women participate in slut shaming because the slut is decreasing their ability to find connection or providing a backdoor for the man. So there's pressure put on the woman to behave in a certain way from women. There's pressure to be put on women from a honor culture, like the female is an extension of the honor of our clan or the honor of our family. And if she's acting in a way that besmirches herself, she's besmirching us. And then the extremes of that, which I'm not promoting, I'm just describing things. The extremes of that is that the woman, like in societies that are different than our society, if a woman gets raped, then she is outcast, right?
Right.
Or
Because
she's either outcast or
she's
the brothers,
tainted even without her own consent being involved.
yeah, or the brothers and the father go and kill the man, right? So there's those kind of pressures there. Why are those there? When we take and I'm sorry, like this says a lot that I keep on saying Logan Paul's fiance. I still don't know her name.
Mina Agdon, I don't know, Agdal, something like that.
So the way that she was treated, or the way that she was used to besmirch Logan Paul, it's a reputation thing as opposed to Russell Brand. So Russell Brand can be one of the guys lining up to bang the girl and bang all these girls, or he's the one guy with all the girls lining up to bang him, and then she's the girl where all the guys are lining up to bang her. There's an asymmetry there. Is there an asymmetry? Where's the crux of the matter of that? And is it unfair that men are treated differently than women when it comes to sexual?
I wonder how unfairly they are treated, though. I wonder. There is some asymmetry, yeah, but is it as much as it's not black and white? Because again, somebody like Russell Brand, there's an ick factor with that. I think a lot of women would not want to be with a man like that.
Yeah.
I think that there would be I don't know, maybe I'm just speaking for myself here, but I would feel like there would be little opportunity for a valuable, true, loving, special connection with somebody who has spent so much time just seeking, I said meaningless. Somebody said it wasn't meaningless. I'll say gratuitous coupling.
So from your point of view, that act is tied to it's tied to a human value. It's tied to a human value. And from what I've gathered from you, one of your strongest human values is connection. Like there's a deep connection, and there's different ways to connect to people. And sex and sexuality are reserved for a very special kind of connection. And so you would be denigrating yourself to connect with somebody who uses that as a connection.
Maybe you would be limiting your potential with your partner. Maybe your partner has limited potential for you. I guess maybe this is too simplistic, but you think about the virginal state. If we were in a society that still did these, like people were virgins until they got married, then your husband or wife would represent all of that kind of connection for you forever. If you marry as virgins, stay married for life. That person embodies that type of connection. That person represents that fully for you. And maybe, so the closer we can get to that, the more special that kind of connection is in your life. And somebody like Russell Brand, or someone who has a massive body count, if we want to use that language, how special can it be at that point to be with your partner. There's lots of other things that can be special, and there's aspects of it that might be special for you. Maybe you've never engaged in a long-term relationship where the relationship had a chance to mature past that initial physical gratification that you were seeking. And so maybe there is a lot that's still special, and I think that there's room for redemption, but I think it's enough to give people pause. And I'm not sure that I'm not sure men really get away with it as much as we say that they do. I think it just depends on what your target is. Who's your target partner?
There's also a social aspect to this. The question of how prevalent sex and sexuality are in our culture. How does that impact how special it can possibly be, or how people treat it, and how, if you are bombarded by sexual imagery, to what extent are you going to be aroused by a private sexual thing? Or is there a different brain state when you're looking at a screen? Do you have a certain way of looking at that or consuming that material? And in real life, there's another way of looking at that, and you can flip between those things.
I think it is. I think I mentioned Dr. Trish Lee, in our last conversation, I think, because this kind of came up, this similar. It's interesting that we've ended up back in that same source topic, but she talks about the way that the brain wires itself to pornography. So you actually bond to voyeurism. You become wired for excitement through voyeurism. And so having somebody right in front of you is not as, it just doesn't stimulate you the same way. So you actually kind of corrupt your own ability to connect with a human being by engaging in too much of that. And I think that's something that is really interesting and alarming. It's another one of the harms that we don't talk about so much about pornography, the way it harms the user.
Yeah. And on the other side, we were talking about yesterday, given that you have marriage and people who have long-term partnerships, and there's a waveform to their being able to be intimate sensually. And we were talking about, what do we do about the general disparity between men and women's sexual drives? And you came back with, there's plenty of women who want to have sex, but the man's disinterested, either because he's found a way to release that, not involving the woman through pornography or extramarital affairs, or because the candle dies, that spark, that thing dies. And what do we do about it dying? Like, how integral to a long-term relationship is sex? And there are a lot of different people with a lot of different values that they put on that.
I just spoke with a gentleman this past week, Rick McCarthy. There's an interview with him on my channel, and he is he's a marriage and family therapist, and he's taught human sexuality to counseling students. And he talked about how you would think that younger couples would have a better sex life, but he's found the best sexual relationships in people in their 70s.
What?
Yeah,
Wait,
that's what he said.
Geriatric intimacies?
Yeah, your face.
Wow, you won't find that on OnlyFans, I hope. But but yeah, if the Social Security finally fails, I guess that's one way to go about it.
Well, see, it's
what do you mean by
interesting that
best?
you think that's funny. That's interesting.
What?
That it would be so shocking and amusing to
Well,
you
okay.
that would be the case.
Because
you're not attracted to those bodies anymore.
Well, yeah, I mean, the attractiveness factor is completely taken on a completely different, like, good sex is totally different for a 70-year-old, and it's not about this. It's no longer something that can be viewed. It's no longer attractive visually, but there's probably
but do you really think that?
I don't know. I'm not interested in viewing that.
No. I don't mean you personally.
A 22-year-old woman in a bathtub would be much more my style than a 84-year-old woman in a bathtub. Where are we going down that road?
No, but we're not talking about a performance.
Yes,
we're
exactly.
talking about a connection.
Yes, exactly.
And so for the couple,
yes,
the older couple, do they not look at one another and find beauty in that? Do they not find attraction in that? Or do you think that they have stopped somehow and they're sort of
No. I think that
themselves?
there's got to be different values going on. There's got to be a different importance in that act.
Which is,
And why is it better? How is that measured? How does one measure? It's just like exit surveys.
well, how is it measured in a relationship?
Geriatric.
Is it always, is there this pressure to always be hyper attractive? And that comes back to the whole conversation about mids. That was,
Oh yeah, mids.
I don't like this conversation. I really dislike
You don't
this.
like the conversation about mids, or you don't like the conversation that's being had about this mid?
Well, on all the threads that we're seeing, and we've been kind of discussing these as they've been popping up recently. There's these guys who are like either criticizing women as mids, which I guess is like mid-level attractiveness. So like you're doing this ranking of a woman's attractiveness.
Yeah.
So they're either being dismissed as mids. You see that all the time. Oh, mid, she's not that hot. And you're looking at this really gorgeous woman and she's just being dismissed as mid. And so that's a derogatory statement. And then other people who are saying all men want mids. When men want mids. And so there's something in this conversation that I think it's interesting. For one thing, you could spin it positively and say, women, you're pressuring yourselves too much to need to be hyper beautiful because of the Instagram models and the airbrushing and the AI and all these ridiculous standards of beauty that you're seeing that nobody ever achieves. And if they do, they only achieve it for a second and it's in a still pose, or maybe there are some women who walk around like that for 5 years of their life. But this is a very brief and very rare thing to be like a 10, like a perfect, gorgeous person. And so be okay with yourself as not that, because we really want that. So that's one way to spin that conversation. It's men don't need you to be the apex of female beauty. They are okay with you being just pretty good.
A real woman.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
And so there's that. So that's the positive spin. But the negative spin on this is like the whole idea that if you fall in love with someone, should you still be ranking that person? Should they still be ranked? Do they want to know that you are still assessing their attractiveness as relative to other women?
Okay, do they want to know?
No, should you at all?
Oh, okay, should you at all?
Like,
So this is the duplicity of woman.
So think about the duplicity. No, there's a duplicity of man that we could go into.
No, the duplicity of man is about conforming to women's desire for a duplicitous man.
No, I would totally reframe that, but we can do that in a minute.
Go on, so you can make your point. Yeah.
So, for instance, the couple that we had dinner with last night, lovely couple, older couple, 70s, yeah, and they what goes through your mind if you think about him ranking his wife?
What goes through your mind?
What goes through your mind?
Well, this is a trick question, because you already said that I shouldn't be doing this. You already told me not to do this.
No, I'm just asking
and
you
not to admit to doing this.
Think about.
So you just should, like, you're forcing me to be duplicitous.
No,
or to risk more discussions later on.
Okay. So if you think about him ranking his wife, do you think that he should be? And what is he ranking her up against?
Exactly.
All women her age?
Exactly.
Or women across the entire age spectrum?
There are different forms of seeing somebody. There's different goggles that you see. You know, there's different ways that somebody, especially as you spend years and thousands and millions of hours with somebody, you see them through all these different states. And some of them, their states, they are at the worst point in their life. And you're witnessing that. And you see that. And so to not somehow be aware of that is, you're asking, like, should you lie? But you suspend, your judgment is no longer
fitted to that. I'm not asking for the communication. I'm asking for his internal process.
Yeah.
Not even communicated.
I'm sure by the time you're 70, you've seen this woman or this partner through so many different things that you're not looking at how they look in that moment. Right? And the ranking, I think you find it odious because it's distilling this huge arc of life that a woman is inhabiting through all these different forms, and she's going all through these different phases, and it's prioritizing one aspect of this human being. That aspect is, there's a certain social currency to it. It's just, it's a reality of that. But to put too much ranking on that rank, to put too much value on that evaluation it's the wrong way to look at that evaluation. Right? And I would say to men, when you're evaluating, especially your long-term partner, do spend some energy looking at her in different ways, looking at her through different lenses, seeing her as, like expanding your palette of seeing the beauty in your woman and women too. The seeing, and maybe women rank men differently than men. They rank men, and that's another conversation. But one time you walked out with high heels, and that was the first time that I felt, not emasculated, but I felt like really dicey about like, oh no, like that's a problem. Now she's taller than me. Like this is a problem. I can't go out in public with this woman now because it's obvious that like I have no claim on her, and they're that, like I'm now vulnerable in this way. But that was just like one like really funny little feeling that I had, and it's not like that doesn't describe the entire reason why you would be with me or what makes us a good couple or not a good couple, but that's one data point. Attractiveness is a data point. I think it's a really important data point. And why is there a $2, $5, $7 trillion industry supported and funded by women, and fueled by women, and for beauty? It's not only about living up to man's standards, because women have internal standards too.
I totally agree with that. I think it's really tricky, and I don't think that there's an easy answer to it. But I think part of the reason that the whole ranking thing within a relationship is difficult is that it implies that you're still shopping. It implies that you're still comparing the person that you have to the marketplace in general. And that is why, to me, thinking about if that man were sitting there with this in his mind, and you look at this couple that's very well established, if you imagine him ranking his woman, it cheapens the entire relationship.
Does it though?
Don't you think?
Okay, listen, there's this, my mom used to sing to me, if you want to be happy for the rest of your life, be sure to make an ugly woman your wife.
Did she sing
From
that
a particular point of view, get an ugly woman to marry you.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and that's a total tongue-in-cheek statement, but, there's also a statement, too, of having a mid-woman. Like, if you just, you feel good, you're not threatened, her beauty isn't like this problem that you have to feel. You can just relax around this woman, and she peaks. She's really beautiful, and then she eases off the beauty. And the wonderful thing about having a long-term relationship is that you see that particular form of female beauty emerging and retreating, and it's like a cycle. It goes through this cycle, and you get to. You don't. It's not necessarily that I'm expecting. Well, one thing, like to not be disappointed, not to expect anything, just to be a witness of that. And then to see her extend through time and feel yourself being attracted to her in more than this one particular way. It doesn't mean that you're distilling a woman into that one aspect of herself, but I don't see, if you put too much value on it and say that's cheapening the whole thing, I think that's a power play, and that you're setting yourself up to creating duplicitous relationships.
Okay.
If you can't just allow a man, to have, this Playboy model from 1957 in his workshop, like, then what does that do? Like, he's got this pinup in his workshop, and maybe it means all these, or maybe even just a drawn pinup. He just has this archetypal female form that's really flirty and sexy. He's not necessarily comparing his real life to it, but there's just this ideal. Like, he just keeps this ideal because it reminds him maybe of like this potency that he has, or like this desire that he has for women in and of itself. And how that could be also seen as something that a woman could desire in man's desire for woman, without it being threatening. But it has to not be threatening, and it has to be within a trusting relationship.
We could keep going down this, or we could pick it up again another time, because I think that I have a lot of thoughts.
She's got a lot of thoughts, and it's real. I feel really bad because, well, one, because it looks like my microphone's turned up too high, and two, we're doing something live and we haven't been paying attention to chat, because chat's like way over there.
Let's see.
So there's going to be a lot of people disagreeing with me and agreeing with you. And
you think so?
I think the reverse will also be fun. I'm going to read Jenny's getting inking with it. She's a long time.
Seems to me women don't mind men being slutty because they can claim they tamed him. And to women, that is indicative of her power. Men seem to judge women based on her purity. And that's an interesting take.
Purity.
That is interesting.
Oh, okay.
Let's see.
Yeah, our audio is clipping, so that is my bad. Shoot.
Okay.
I just muted it.
So Heather says she thinks people disagree more with me. So tell me more about that. That's interesting. I'd like to hear more about that.
Why people are disagreeing with you? Well,
Yeah, I'd like to know. It's interesting because I think that there's good in it and bad in it, in that conversation, in that assessment. I agree with what you're saying about why you would appreciate that or why a man would appreciate that in a woman. I just think that the argument, I find it a little bit troubling to see the judgment of one's own partner in that way. I think that I've seen a couple of these things floating around lately, the ranking, and I've always found that to be strange because as soon as you bought the car, are you still shopping all the other cars? I know that's a cheap analogy, but
yeah,
like,
no, I
are
mean,
you
okay,
still?
like
Or do you
just
just
with that
commit to your
analogy,
car?
I'm not. You can, and we can have a lot. We have a long drive today, so you can take me to task for this. But I just because I have a Mazda Miata doesn't mean I'm not like admiring the Porsche that's driving faster than me, right? I mean, it's just like this
So
pure.
is your Miata kind of a mid for a sports car?
The Miata, and I'm perfectly fine with a mid. Like it's perfectly mine. It's not too ostentatious. It's a great car. It's got great handling. You could totally say that I'm talking about two things at one time. Right now, the tops especially when the top's down, like it's just like, you know. So
Benjamin.
well, no, I mean, I think, and it has to do with a certain amount of, can a man be respectful in his desire, and can a woman be not threatened by that desire for woman? Like, to what degree is a man's wandering eye so called a threat or a cheapening or a way of breaking? How does that break or violate connection and intimacy? So yeah,
That's a good topic.
it would be unapropos for like the 75-year-old man to turn to his 74-year-old wife and say, like, of all the 75-year-olds, you're probably in like the 70% range attractiveness. So like there's no reason to do that, and that would be, there's no possible reason to do that. So you shouldn't do that.
Okay. So
But that's not the same saying as like this man, a 75-year-old man with a 75-year-old wife, not recognizing, okay, there's a difference between lusting, appreciating, and recognizing.
well, it's funny because it seems like we can't have these conversations on this really high level conceptual kind of plane without it delving into things that are very personal. So that's kind of funny, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But
You want to draw a line.
yeah, I do. But you asked about why is it a threat?
Yeah.
And so I was in a relationship for 12 years. My husband, father of my sons, 12-year marriage with a person who cheated on me repeatedly, like chronic infidelity. And I think that there is where is the line? Where is the line? Is the line looking, shopping, but not doing? Is the line how much looking, how much shopping, how much? So I think that the threat is that, and this comes back to that whole duplicity in the relationship kind of conversation. If you are,
Don't ask, don't tell.
maybe don't ask, don't tell.
And then, but there should be a line too.
But there's like, what's your business in your mind? Where do you have your own right, even in a monogamous relationship, to have privacy in your thoughts versus when does it become something that's the other person's business? And I think that that's something that's negotiated between couples.
And I think ideally it would be nice to eventually get to on such a same page, and it probably takes 50 years to get here, where you really don't need to have any privacy from each other. Maybe you really have just accepted each other, and accepted each other and not being able to accept each other in certain ways, right? And kind of matryoshka-dolling through different forms of judgment with each other. And I there's an interesting. I don't think this is too personal, but with us, but when we first started to be involved, I was looking at like my presence on YouTube and my presence on Twitter, and I had a very flirty presence, and I was just flirty was a part of my. It was a fun aspect of that, and I did something that was a little too flirty, and I didn't mean it to be too flirty, but you reacted like that's really flirty, and then I looked at it, I'm like, oh my god, I didn't realize that I was being that flirty, and I don't want to, especially because like I just don't want, especially because we're public, I don't want me being flirty with another woman casts a spare or like cast questions on like am I sincere in my dedication to you. So there's this whole aspect that's kind of like I'm trying to renegotiate. And a couple of interviews ago, I interviewed this an actress, Caitlin Yatima, and for some reason I really deliberated on whether or not I should publish that episode, even though I looked at it and I wasn't being flirty at all. I had a really personal conversation with this woman who there's just for some reason there was this overlap between how I was viewing her and how I was viewing you. Like maybe it's just like brown eyes, brown hair, very presentable woman that I'm talking to, and it was just this weird thing. And like, am I violating a personal connection that I have by simulating an intimate connection with this woman and talking about her sexual trauma, talking about her, we got into her, her menstrual cycle and the horror stories that she's making about this thing. So I was really trying to deliberate, can I interact intimately with the woman publicly anymore? And even professionally, is that something that I should back away from and go in a different direction?
That much?
It just like it was just an open question of whether or not like that's proper for me to do, to model
really
having an intimate conversation with a woman.
You're going full Mike Pence.
Well, that's something that I was going to ask you to talk about too, but we're almost at the end of the show. Yeah. So, but I'm having to renegotiate my public persona.
That's interesting.
And also this is another personal thing, but when I was away in DC, this past weekend, I went to my spiritual group had a national congress, and I went there, and I was gone for a week, and we'd been really close, and then that was our first break that we've had in a while, and so I was kind of looking from afar at our relationship, and something that came to me really strongly was that this conversation, this show, ourselves would be really good. It would be really good to struggle to reinvent myself, to really investigate who I am, and then also to really explore with you in this capacity. And it would be an add-on to a relationship and a value added. And also it would serve the function of why I've done so much work with women on my channel, which is to model the proper way to be and to speak with a woman, to speak with a feminist, or speak with a woman about her life as a woman, and trying to do that respectfully but also playfully, that this could be an extension of that work. So I just wanted to say that those are just some of the dynamics that are going on to kind of stay that the conversation we're having isn't just an abstract conversation. It's something that I do take seriously, and that I'm trying to figure out like the right way to model something good, and not just to be a critic, to say, here's a way to be in
What's your
a
foundation?
proper relationship, and this is the benefits of it, and here are the sacrifices that one makes in order to achieve that, And maybe going around and telling women where they are on a 10-point scale is something that I'm going to have to finally let go of. Maybe that's just...
Is that going to be a big sacrifice?
Maybe it's going to be maybe it's worth it. Maybe it's not worth it. I don't know.
Oh, gosh. See, look, Lodi says, this is a kind of weird conversation.
Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. So is this going to be really, really embarrassing? Are we going to be really... Am I embarrassed? Okay.
I don't know. Are you?
I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Do you have any closing remarks?
No, I think this just went a direction I wasn't expecting, but it's interesting.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
I
don't know. I'll think about whether I want you to pull this down later.
Yeah, can you rank Russell Brand for me?
Rank Russell Brand? Oh gosh. Well, I think he's really intelligent, and I like a lot of the things that I've heard him say, although I don't watch his show, so I'm not keeping up with what he says overall, but I liked him on his take on COVID. I thought he was really... So
you're judging a man by his opinions, not by his the symmetry of his facial.
If I were to say like how physically attractive he is, I think he's very attractive. Just physically. I don't know what that would be in terms of like a number. That's hard. I don't know. I guess like my my 10 would probably be like a George Clooney
Yeah,
10 years ago kind of.
Oh, 10 years ago. What
Yeah,
happened to him?
he's a bit old.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. He's probably like the same age as me. I don't know how old he is. But
You're
he's
more of a
old.
Clooney than a Brad Pitt girl.
Yeah. Brad Pitt's just to me. But Russell Brand, he's pretty hot.
Okay.
But if you add in his character and his history, he's less than mid. Yeah.
Less than mid.
Less than mid.
Oh, there's one more thing we can talk about.
no.
Oh, but it's
Oh no, we gotta go.
Okay, yeah, but we just said let the kids play. There's just something maybe we can talk about later, or people can comment on this. We took a bike ride through our neighborhood yesterday.
Oh yeah.
And there's this beautiful neighborhood that we have with a park on every block, and every single one of them on this beautiful Saturday were completely empty.
Empty, not even.
There's no
not
kid.
even
Where
a
are the
child.
kids playing?
Yeah.
Where are they playing?
Yeah, it was a beautiful day. It's like 69 degrees, 70 degrees, sunny.
So I hope everybody
Yep.
takes advantage of your day. Thank you very much for spending part of it with us. We'll see you in a couple weeks, unless we don't.
Thank you.
Have a good day.